exactly.
Yeah, it's a big day. It's a very
It's a
big day,
big
no
day.
doubt.
It's a big day. The Prime Minister was almost in tears when he inaugurated this thing today. His voice choked, and he vividly remembered what happened in March 2020, how the disease separated each one of us, and how people, in the hospital. I mean, you could not do anything to your near and dear ones.
Yeah.
You
No, it can be, the
just,
very thought can be very, very overwhelming.
yes, absolutely.
I think after the health workers, it is the teaching community that has affected a lot at large, right?
Teaching community is affected on many fronts. I think it is it's a bizarre and ironic thing that the teachers almost worked like doctors in the sense that they provided the emotional support to the children. Just imagine if the teachers had not reached out to the children, the kind of mental health problems it would have created.
Exactly.
And of course, whatever learning could take place, at least to those who are digitally, accessing everything. Of course, large number of them do not have digital access. That's a different thing. But those who could have, they had learning also. But the teachers, particularly the private school teachers who did their best, they are the ones who are hit the hard. The parents have not paid fees, the governments have not supported, judiciary has not supported. They had to take a salary cut, a school closure, job losses, and nobody is talking about it. That is the most unfortunate part.
It's very, very unfortunate. It is very unfortunate. And the way they have risen to the occasion, the way I know, I mean, they were not all computer savvy. They all didn't know how to do online teaching, but the way they have learned it and their way they are, dispensing with it. I mean, it is absolutely amazing. And to say that why should we pay the fees because there is no school? It is so unfortunate. It is so unfortunate.
In fact, for teachers, it has been a 360-degree shift, because something which was always a luxury, putting their hands, exploring
They were
their
24/7, they were on the job.
Once it was a luxury, and now they had overnight they had to be equipped with technological skills, and I think that was the new normal for them, and which paid off.
Yeah.
So that is something.
And sir, how do you think that the digital divide, that gap can be narrowed down?
Yeah, I mean, I have been talking about quite a lot, and you see, now the new mantra should be access to internet is access to education.
Right.
You see, so earlier we had other problems with accessibility of education, the quality, lack of schools and books and teachers. I think now everything is superseded by lack of internet bandwidth, devices, and we may use alternate methods as we call TV, radio, voice over, WhatsApp, and whatnot. But that is no substitute to internet, bandwidth, and a device in the hand of a child. So that is what the civil society, the government, the non-governmental organizations, we have to work for that in a big way. So in the meantime, I'm only hoping that once the schools reopen, at least those children who have been the greatest losers, at least they will redeem their learning losses and gaps they might have suffered. But the effort to digitize the country, effort to take the fiber optics or other internet infrastructure to every nook and corner of the country should be the agenda of the government as well.
That's a very big thing, We are talking only about, when we talk about digitization and when we talk about internet facilities and computerization, we are generally talking about big cities, but India is not the big cities. India is in the villages. So,
exactly.
Until and unless we can reach the remotest corners of our country and, bring digitization there, I think we are very far from achieving what we want to.
Absolutely.
Very true. Hi
So,
everyone. I'm Sandeep.
Sandeep ji, welcome. Good evening.
Good evening, sir.
Thank you, Ashok ji. Thank you. Good evening. Yeah,
Hello,
no, I was
Sandeep.
just.
How are you?
Hi. I'm good, Devyani. How are you doing?
I'm good too. Thank you so much for accepting the invitation. Thank you so
No,
much.
delighted to be part of. Delighted to be part of.
Thank you.
It'll be a lot of learning, I'm sure.
I think
No, I was
most
just
of
listening to. Yeah, I was just listening to Mr. Ashok and Rita. I felt that probably, I mean, it's really a kind of a big ambition to have, honestly. I mean, given the country we are at stage, especially in terms of the technology and the penetration of the
right.
internet and the phone.
It's a
I think
huge
what is
country, it's a
yeah,
huge country. It's
exactly.
not.
What I see this is a kind of little two-pronged approach, honestly, right? I'm looking at while you think of making this universal access to internet and the device, but also at the same time thinking very innovative, like how best we can deal with the education crisis by not depending too much on that tech, right? I mean, that's also like another thing we need to be thought through. But yeah, I mean, you are completely right. I mean, the kind of like, divide has been created not only between a kind of, urban and rural, but also within the urban setups, right? I mean, that is also like, you could see intra-urban divide, and then just forget about the kind of urban-rural. That's kind of one thing, which is stark. But also, if you look at the kind of big cities like which are grade 2, grade 3 cities, especially the tier 2, tier 3 cities, where you see that a lot of divide in the urban areas of the internet and the kind of access to device.
So it's 4 p.m. Uh, because Miss Anuradha Handa said she'll be joining a little late because she has another engagement. So I think we can start and another 2 minutes. And Supriya, can we start?
Yeah, sure. I just wanted to make sure to inform everyone that we would now be going live on Facebook. So if anyone wants to catch us up live on Facebook, please feel free to do so. So I'm just going to go live, and then there's a little introductory video on Edudevs, which we would like to show you first, and followed by the webinar. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for the video. The new National Education Policy 2020, revealed on Wednesday, 29th July, seeks to introduce and implement a sea of changes across all levels of education in India. It also seeks to implement changes in the way the schools, colleges, and teachers are trained and how they approach education. The Education Policy of 2020 is the third NEP and is released under the Prime Ministership of Mr. Narendra Modi. The first came in 1968 under Indira Gandhi and the second in 1986 under Rajiv Gandhi, which was revised in 1992. The policy is based on the pillars of access, equity, quality, affordability, accountability, and will transform India into a vibrant knowledge hub. Good evening, everyone. I, Supriya Kapoor, welcome you all to our webinar on the National Education Policy 2020, Redefining the Role of the Educator. This webinar is jointly held by Edudevs and Amrita Vishwa Vidyapeetham University. This webinar is extremely significant as we are joined by a wonderful selection of panelists. We have with us Dr. Ashok Pandey, who is the Director of CBSE-affiliated Alcon Group of Schools, Chairperson of the Council for Global Citizenship Education, Advisor of Lung Care Foundation in Delhi, and the former Chairperson of the National Progressive Schools Conference. Dr. Pandey is the recipient of the National Teachers Award by the President of India in 2012 and the CBSE Award for his contribution in education and community development. He's a nationally respected K-12 education leader with over 37 years of experience. He has authored 2 bestsellers on education. Welcome, sir. Next, we have with us Ms. Anuradha Handa, who is the principal of GD Goenka School in Gurgaon. She has demonstrated history of working in the education management industry and is skilled in coaching, classroom management, lesson planning, educational technology, and instructional design. Ms. Handa is a strong education professional with an MSc in physics and B.Ed focused in physics from Delhi University. Welcome, ma'am. We also have with us Mrs. Rita Sen, who is a trained postgraduate in English literature and a national scholar. She retired after a long stint as principal DPS Rohini in Delhi, a school that she founded, nurtured for 20 years, and took to great heights. Mrs. Sen is the recipient of the National Award for Teachers from the President of India in 2007 and was also appointed by the Lieutenant Governor of Delhi as a member of the Delhi Education Advisory Board for 2 terms. A successful author within Encyclopedia Britannica, Mrs. Sen now conducts workshops on school management, pedagogy, parenting, and faculty development. Welcome, ma'am. We also have with us Mr. Sandeep Mishra, who is the Country Director for STIR Education, an international NGO that supports education systems. Mr. Mishra builds strategic partnerships with national and state governments and NGO partners and leads high-quality delivery of the model of teachers and systems intrinsic motivation. His current work is based with over a decade of experience of working with national and international organizations, including 3 startups. Welcome, sir. On behalf of Edudevs and Amrita Vishwa Vidyapeetham, I welcome you all to today's webinar. Dear attendees, we kindly request you to please keep your audio on mute. We also request all the attendees except the panel discussion members to switch off their videos so that we do not face any lag in streaming. Kindly post questions on the chat box addressing and mentioning the panelist name. These questions will be later discussed in the Q&A session. I would now like to invite Mrs. Devyani Kapoor, our mentor and founder of Edudevs, to formally begin the webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Supriya. First of all, I warmly welcome all our esteemed panelists. We have an illustrious panel today. They all come from varied, acclaimed, and distinguished achievements. some of whom also happen to be my very close friends. I also welcome Mr. Maheshwara Chaitanya, Chairman, B.Tech College, Amrita Vishwa Vidyapeetham. Today, we all have gathered here to delve into one of the most revolutionary documents, I would say, of the decade, which is the new education policy, and understand what it expects from various stakeholders: the student, the teacher, the parents, and the institutions, and how each stakeholder stands benefited from it. But most importantly, we are here today to deliberate on our preparedness to implement such an humongous initiative. Are we prepared? I'm honored to announce today that Edudevs, in collaboration with Amrita Vishwa Vidyapeetham, launches the first episode redefining the role of educator of their web series named Decoding NEP 2020, which in its various episodes will delve into the various aspects of new education policy through its discussions with the industry experts. I have always believed education provides an exponential growth graph in one's personality as well as one's opinions. We learn the value of ourselves and others and not just the prize. And hence, education cannot just be the product of facts. It is also the growth of mind. It is an evolutionary process of the self. It is not just about honing your cognitive skills, but also about considering the social and emotional well-being, something which has been neglected for a very long time. The real purpose of education then is about possibilities. Possibilities in experimenting new things and finding joy in learning. However, for the last 60 to 70 odd years post-independence, we catered our children with an education system which was primarily designed to fulfill the British needs to create a class of subordinates. A system which was immersed in structure, rigidity, rote learning, cutthroat competition. And what we had was a crisis in the society. We overemphasized the IQ and somewhere neglected the EQ and the SQ. The NEP 2020 is a huge step in this right direction. It focuses on the holistic development of the child. The policy lays on emphasis on 4 key area reforms: curricular change to build strong foundational skills, improving quality of learning across all levels of education, right from the Montessori primary to the higher ed. Shift in the ways of assessment, which was something we all were looking for. And finally, the need for a systematic transformation. Talking about the changes in the role of educator in the system, the new education policy envisages them to play a very critical role, be it our demographic size and the variables. All these set on one side. One critical common factor, which is the educator, if properly groomed, properly empowered, will definitely be the change makers. With this, I'm not taking much of the spilling the beans and not taking our panelists' time. I would now request Mr. Chaitanya to please welcome our panelists. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. I'm really fortunate to have in between all these esteemed members, distinguished members who are in the educational community. I think we started this on the right time, because today being the most hopeful day, the happy day, the vaccination have been started, and it brings about the confidence and hope to all the millions and billions of people across the country. Secondly, I feel that we should thank the distinguished people who were involved in framing the NEP 2020, because I believe that it has been a lot of years since the education policy was wanting for a change. I have always been thinking. I used to teach maybe till 2015, and I used to think why the students are getting so much conditioned after their graduation. Because I used to teach for the BTech students, and at the moment they are out from the college, being a mechanical engineer or a computer science engineer, they always have a feeling that my scope of mind is limited to computer science or electrical engineering or mechanical engineering. So that is the conditioning I have felt. So now the national education policy is bringing a lot of change, making it multidisciplinary. So which means that even at the school level, I feel the teachers are expected to think from the technological point of view. Even a biology teacher have to think from technological point of view. So in this present situation, for the past 11 months, the schools are closed. All our teachers are struggling to, or taking up the challenge to ensure that the quality education is being delivered. So let me take this opportunity to congratulate them, to all the teachers across the country who took so much of struggle to ensure that the students are given their best. That is more critical, more important, because when the students step out from the school, they have a big hope, because it is their future, it is their foundation, that is the pillar. So the role of a teacher in the life is, I believe that it is much more than parents, because teachers spend most of the time with the children. So it is the time to congratulate all the teachers, and I'm 100% sure that these teachers who went through this change in the past 10 to 11 months, they can definitely 100% they will be able to cope up or embrace the challenge or embrace the changes that is demanded by the National Education Policy 2020. Because I feel that we are already into the fourth industrial revolution. The 5G is being rolled out maybe in this year itself. So the COVID-19 has created a platform where it is moving so fast. And immediately after the health workers or the health community, I believe that it is the teachers who have suffered a lot, because teachers are next to the health workers, because they ensure that they are working 24/7, irrespective of whether it is a holiday or not, ensuring that the PowerPoint presentations, videos, assignments, everything is ready, and making sure that it is available online. So let me thank all the teachers, all the attendees here, and let me extend my warmest welcome from on behalf of Amrita Vishwa Vidyapeetham to all the distinguished panelists here. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much.
So moving further, now we have a common question addressed to each panelist. The order will be first Dr. Ashok Pandey, then Mrs. Rita Sen, and then Mr. Sandeep Mishra. Mrs. Amrita Handa will shortly be joining us.
I think she had joined. She had joined, Devyani.
Actually, she has joined.
Yes,
don't know.
I can see her.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello,
Yeah.
warm welcome.
Hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon and warm welcome to you, Anuradha. How are you?
I am good. Sorry, got a little delayed. Was in a workshop. So just moved out of there and came in here. So.
And you're fresh with a lot of, I'm sure, thoughts to share with our viewers and deliberate on the topic. So the sequence, yeah. So the first question is a general overview of what your take is on the new education policy. The education industry is abuzz with new education policy since last July, with several educationists praising the move and others showcasing concerns about its implementation. What is your take on it? Should it be seen as new beginning to make India a knowledge hub? Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Divyani ji. Thank you, Shri Maheshwar Chaitanya ji. Both of you have accorded such a wonderful, kind welcome to all of us. And my distinguished panelists, I'm absolutely delighted. The problem with NEP is that it is too good. That is its only problem, I can tell you. And if something is too good, once I remember former Foreign Minister, Mrs. Sushma Swaraj, was speaking on the floor of Lok Sabha. And Mr. Sangma was the Lok Sabha speaker at that time. And he said that, ma'am, don't deliver such a good address on the floor of the house. We are not used to it. So, I think the same thing has happened with NEP. It is very, very inspirational, transformative in nature. Chaitanya ji said that, yes, it has come after a long time. That point is given. In my opinion, it is one of the most wonderful covenants between the government and the children of this country. And this document defines what is the best for the children, what will make the children best for the country and for the humanity. And it also gives a bit of an idea as to how government, now the policy is in place with the management of resources. It will marshal the experts, the policymakers, the people on the ground, the teachers, the school leaders, pool their energies together to implement the policy. And this policy, the last thing that I want to tell you in my opening remark is one of the best universal designs for learning. So it has the elements which takes care of the children. It has the element which also ensures that the teachers are given the respect that they deserve, and they are given the opportunity to innovate and respect their autonomy. So this universal design of learning in the form of this document as an agreement between the government and the children is perhaps the best thing that has happened. And of course, its success will depend on its implementation.
Thank you, sir. Very well said. Really futuristic policy it is. Rita Sen, ma'am, over to you.
Thank you, Devyani, and thank you, Mr. Maheshwara Chaitanya ji. Yes, Ashok has said a lot about how good the education policy is. I'll be a little more specific about it. You've asked whether it is a new beginning or not. I think it is definitely a new beginning because some of the ideas that have been mooted by the NEP 2020 are absolutely path-breaking. They are seminal changes that we have been waiting for a very, very long time. To me specifically, the focus on the age group of 3 to 6 years, the pre-primary or Anganwadi segment, and bringing it under formal education is a very big step towards making our education truly global, Although, we know that studies have shown that 80% of a child's cognitive development happens around this time, around, this age group. But still, so far, this has been the most unstructured, arbitrary, neglected part of education. Even your Right to Education Act of 2009 does not focus on this age group at all. It talks about free and compulsory education only from 6 to 14 years. So it is totally silent on education prior to 6 years. So what happens to millions of children before the age of 6 years? If some private institutions were doing it, it was totally out of choice. And there was nothing mandatory or obligatory on the part of any institution or anyone, or for any child, for every child to go to school at that age, and specifically for that section of society where it is needed the most. So by formalizing this part of education, the NEP ensures that all children, irrespective of where they are, will be in schools, then they are all benefited. So to me, even before we start discussing about the other aspects, the National Education Policy 2020 is most certainly a new beginning, because in more ways than one, the policy begins with an idea which is a pioneering idea. That's
Thank you so much. Thank you. Over to you, Mrs. Anuradha Handa.
Yeah, thank you, Devyani, and a very good evening to everyone. Uh, as I said, I got a little delayed because I was attending a session on NEP only, which was scheduled today for the principals of Gurgaon, and it incidentally was 3 to 4 and got a little stretched. So, very, very good evening to Devyani ji and Dr. Maheshwari. It's a pleasure to be here, and a good evening to my co-panelist. So I am in sync with what Dr. Ashok Pandey said, that it is too good. It is something, when you look at every aspect of NEP, you feel that connect with it. You really want that it should come to life sooner than later. And as Rita Senji said, that it is path breaking, it is a new beginning. In fact, I would say that it is, in terms of, we are re-looking at things, the way the education is being imparted now. So it is a fresh look at how we are going to bring different things together and take it to a different level, so that now the children, or through this education, we are able to get a closer look at life, because the NEP 2020 talks of preparing children for life by connecting them strongly with life experiences, that is the experiential learning, where there is lesser emphasis on rote learning and there is greater connection with life, and children are prepared for their livelihood as a part of life. And the best thing about the document that we have gone through is that every stakeholder who is going to be the part of implementation of NEP 2020, the role and responsibility of each stakeholder has been very clearly defined. There is a lot of clarity that everyone gets, having the document that has come out and all the reading that we have done so far. So we are all, as educators, really excited and looking forward to bring NEP 2020 into life. That's my take on it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Very rightly said, it is futuristic, it is a reimagination of the Indian education system. And now over to Mr. Sandeep Mishra.
Thanks, Devyani, and thank Dr. Chaitanya for having us here. And as my co-panelist said, I think taking cue from all the kind of three of you, I was just trying to understand as to what is missing in this policy, honestly. So I was just reading this policy multiple times, and I felt that perhaps it includes everything, and you don't need to think anything which is being missed by the policymakers. I mean, this policy, you can call it kind of a very idealistic, very ideal policy, and too good to be a true policy, right? Honestly, I mean, at times I feel that's like so many things are being committed and promised to the country. But I think what really stuck out to me is the kind of a centrality of the teachers. Teaching as a profession is being seen as a kind of the profession of not a profession of choice, right? So if you look at the kind of the Prime Minister's address 5 years back in 2015, he was talking about that how teaching as a profession is losing its sheen, and how could we really restore the moral profession of teaching, moral purpose of teaching, and make sure that teachers are being respected and feeling really motivated to teach well. So I think this policy definitely talks about the teachers and their role and their importance, and talks about how they should feel autonomous, how they should feel accountable, but also at the same time feel motivated to teach well, because they are the ones, I mean, no matter what you bring in the form of the policy, but ultimate responsibility lies on the people who are in the practice, who are very close to the child. As Dr. Chaitanya said, that the teachers are the ones who are most close to the children, and they are the ones who are, I mean, one of the most proximate factor for a teach children learning outcome and the lifelong learning. So if you really want to cultivate the joy of learning in students, it is very important to really think that what kind of teachers you want to have in the country. And I think this policy talks about it. It's very holistic in nature. I mean, as policy itself says that this is the first policy of the world in 21st century. Whereas I feel that it's like one of the most holistic policy in the world, honestly. And it talks about the emphasis on, as Rita ji said, that how much it is like, putting focus, and which means almost very neglected domain so far is the early childhood care and education. I mean, ICDS centers in the country are meant to do that work, but because of multiple regions, not only the regions of capability, but also in the region of intent and the focus, they have not been able to achieve the objectives of education in early grades. So instead talking about very compartmentalized approach, I think the policy is talking about very holistic approach and takes about a very clear targets for the short, medium, and long term, and being very specific. When I say short, medium, long, I think it talks very clearly as to like what is the preconditions to be successful, right? And it talks about like teachers recruitment. It talks about how it is important to build the right kind of institutions. In medium terms, generally in the country, and I think, I mean, most of you have seen this, that the successful components will either need a mission or a commission, right? And this policy talks about the mission of foundation literacy and numeracy, which is, I think, a very remarkable attempt by the policymakers here, where they say that you need to attain universal foundation literacy and numeracy, because that's the kind of the gateway to enter into a kind of lifelong learning pathway. So by 2025 achieving universal FLN, by 2040 becoming the best education system in the world. I think these are all very very clearly targeted components, I think, which policy intend to show. I think there are all kind of these takeaways. I think the one thing which I really, while I feel that, and I'll stop here, while I feel very sort of highly excited about seeing this policy come into reality, at the same time, I feel little sort of, I think, skeptical as to how, I mean, how would we be able to do this? And that is something I think all of us and everyone in the society definitely should think, that how do they see their role to make sure that this such a good policy is being implemented in its true spirit, and what we really want to achieve as part of this, I mean, as an outcome of this policy is being achieved by the society as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandeep. I was actually very struck by your thought where you said that about the role of the teachers, because if I compare the Kothari Commission with the report and the new education policy, every policy realizes the critical role that the educator plays. But then what is being done about, empowering them? Then there is lack of incentives, there is ad hocism, there is, so for years and years, teacher empowerment has greatly been neglected, and it only tantamounts to a workshop or a two, but a structured, curriculum for teacher empowerment. And this policy does seek to do that. So thank you, everyone. Very enriching discussion. Now we are moving on to the second segment, where we will be specifically, addressing some questions to each panelist. And my first question is to Ashokji. I have read your article, and I'm honestly speaking multiple times, running the pestle risk analysis tool, in fact, which talks so much about the challenges of implementation, because everything looks very fancy on paper. We are all very, there are a lot of applauds to the new education policies format and document. But then when we look at its challenges, what, according to you, are the most prominent challenges in implementation of this policy, considering that we've just discussed the major divide that exists not just between rural and urban, but in urban also, the tier 1 and tier 2 and tier 3 cities. Yes, sir. So you're
You're
on
on mute,
mute.
Dr. Ashok.
So sorry. I just wanted to allay, some of the fears which Sandeep was saying that the policy is too good to be implemented. I can tell you, while we are discussing things here in all earnestness, the government is working 24/7. I can tell you that. Every day, the government is working as per a Gantt chart, that what do we have to do today to help us reach towards the implementation. So while the actual implementation will have a cutoff date, but before that, all the enablers will be on the ground, which means taking the stakeholders on the board and also creating some approvals. When you have such a huge policy which is going to be implemented in a federal structure like ours, we need intergovernmental, interdepartmental, center and state approvals, agreements. All those things are happening. NCERT is working day and night to prepare the curriculum framework, which is going to be the first thing required, right? So similarly, all the governments are working. So that is one thing. But yes, since you refer to the piece that I wrote in Financial Express, I have given 3 or 4 red flags, which will be the problem area. And that problem area comes from the policy which Supriya said in the beginning, 1968, 1986, 92, the curriculum framework 2005 and 10. One big problem is that non-partisan agreement on education between the states and the center. I think that is the first thing. If all the governments in the country agree that education will be out and above the politics, then probably our half the problem is solved. This is the first thing. The second thing will be the funding. 1968 policy also talked about 6% GDP on education, and this policy is also talking about 6%. I was sincerely hoping, with all my appreciation for the policy, that they should have mentioned 10%, not 6%, right? But even if we can do 6%, we need a lot of things. But look, where this 6%, we are looking very hopefully to the budget. This 6% is going to be very, very inadequate. Rita talked about, and others also talked about, these foundation years. Do you know, between 3 years and 6 years, 20 crore children are coming to schools. Where are the schools for them? Where are the teachers for them? Where are the learning materials for them? Where will be the midday meal for them? I think this requires a different kind of allocation of budget. So that is the second area. The third area, I would say, is, of course, we have talked about it, digital inequality. So we had already inequalities of societal, the religious and other areas, the marginalized, the vulnerable. But this digital divide is a new inequality. So that is the third thing. And the fourth thing, in my opinion, is the government and all of us have to debate it a little more openly, how the government is going to take the private sector on board. Everybody talks about the efficiency and competencies of the private sector, but they don't want to give the kind of autonomy and the kind of hand-holding that the private sector requires. So we cannot just wish that no, one fine morning, half of the country will become a philanthropic-minded country, and all of them have to contribute to education, and government will only be a beneficiary. I think that is not going to work. So that relationship between the private and public partnership is going to be another area. Today, 40% children are coming to the private schools. This number is going to increase or it will decrease depending upon what kind of enablers we create around the private sector. So I think for now, Devyani, these 3 or 4 problem areas that I want to flag.
Very aptly put, Ashokji. I think these are the big red flags which might just, and the only red flags which the policy might face. Otherwise, if you talk about the teachers, the institution, they are also geared up to take the bull by the horns. Very quickly, there is a related question, Sandeep, for you, that because now Sir has spoken about these challenges, I want to further go deep into this. While the institutions in the metros, cities, we are sitting here brainstorming, discussing about the implementation, so much is happening. And in fact, I also had few principals approaching me, and that is where this idea came up. You know, where a principal who's still here, probably in Fazilka or Ganganagar or those areas, where they said, "Ma'am, something should be done where our teachers get to know about it. They are very oblivious of this whole document." So, could you share a realistic picture of the 2 and the 3-tier cities? What is the scenario, and how do you think this will happen in these cities?
Yeah, no, thanks, Devyani. So I think, I mean, as you rightly said, right, I think the kind of excitement and the buzz and the active sort of participation is happening mostly in the kind of, no, I mean, tier 1 cities, especially like metros and the places where there are like, no, I think more action to discuss the policy, and also the kind of, no, the pros and cons to implementation was being discussed. I think that kind of energy perhaps is not there in terms of the action in the smaller cities, especially if you look at the tier 2, tier 3 cities. I think the people, especially the educators, the education community, they're excited about the policy. They're seeing a lot of hope in terms of like, you know, how this policy will take them to a kind of place where they really would like to have the education system in place. But I think in terms of like, you know, the active participation of a lot of people in terms of really making sure that what policy talks about, making sure that everyone understands the nuances of the policy and see how they see their role in implementing it. I think that is not being that sort of, no, I mean, to my experience, and I participated in a couple of like, no, I think webinars which have been organized by tier 2, tier 3 city sort of organizers. But what I'm sort of observing is that it's not that a kind of excitement and the buzz is happening there. There is a hope, but also how that gets implemented is something is still a kind of really skepticism is permeating across this.
Yeah, thank you. I think here what Ashokji said, a lot can happen if there is a partnership or collaboration between the private and the public sector, because we can't wait for another 50 years and then think that, okay, let this be a gradual process. So this can be speeded up if there is this happy hand holding between the public and the private sector, and also the non-profit sectors. So that can probably weigh out. So Brother Chaitanya, moving on to you, I think your question is next, which is addressed to Anuradha Handa.
Yeah, thank you, Devaniji. So I got the keyword from Anuradha ma'am in her opening remarks. The keyword is experiential learning, and that is the buzzword now. See, experiential learning is the most excellent way in which the topics can be taught. The concept can be related with the real-time applications, and I believe that that is the way ahead with the increase of using technology in education. So, but that said, what do you think that, or how do we really implement? Because aren't our our schools really ready to accept that kind of a change, or are the educators ready to accept that kind of a change? And how do you think that it can be effectively implemented, at least at the minimum level, when you look forward for maybe next 5 to 10 years time?
So, as I understand your question, Dr. Chaitanya, it is essentially 2 components. One is the implementation of experiential learning, and the second is the extensive use of technology. That's what, and how the technology would also aid us in implementing the experiential learning. Probably, have I understood it correct?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So as far as the technology is concerned, I think one thing that all of us would agree to, that this COVID era that we have all gone through, the past 10 months have pushed us by 10 years, so to say. Last year, if I talk of January 2020, sitting here in my office at this time, nobody would have ever imagined that we could have continued with online classes, making use of technology, and actually, having the children to go through the entire session being at home and still be able to do good justice. Of course, there would be that digital divide. It would, like Dr. Ashok Pandey said, that there would be many schools where it would not be feasible. But I would reflect upon, the experience that we carry as a school. So this 1 year actually has given us a lot in terms of being optimistic to take technology forward and to effectively include it for having experiential learning or flipped learning, so to say. As an educator, flipped learning, where you can have children doing things at their own pace, where you can have synchronous and asynchronous material, learning happening. So that is something we were always wanting to do, but we were not able to implement it. So in this 1 year, we've gained this confidence that this is something that we were pushed into and we succeeded. And it was very well accepted both by the teachers. You see teachers being ready with their material, putting it, with sharing it with the children before the actual conduct of the online synchronous interaction. So we have, this year has helped us progress towards the child-centric approach, experiential learning, and using technology extensively for that. So this is the first point. So if we talk of the readiness of the school, I agree that this is not something which will happen overnight. There has to be a constant effort in this direction. The pedagogical plans have to be effectively made. The assessments and assignments have to be embedded into the entire pedagogical plan. But again, our affiliating body, CBSE, has started pushing us in that direction. Like rightly pointed out by Dr. Pandey, that the government and CBSE are working day and night to actually equip the educators, the schools, the leaders with this kind of a vision and preparedness and an actual program on ground, so that we are able to implement the student-centric approach and experiential learning. So pedagogical plans, detailed pedagogical plans, which are made with assessment for learning, assessment as learning, art integrated learning, making use of technology. I think that is something that is taking us in the direction of the effective and successful implementation of experiential learning. So that is my take on it.
Thank you, ma'am. It is really, really fascinating, and happy to hear from you that the teachers have already embraced it, and really saying when I spoke in the beginning, the teachers definitely deserve their congratulations, because as you said, they were forced to accept the technological change. And I feel that we are too closer towards the digital revolution once the 5G and such kind of technological implementation comes up. So thank you, ma'am. Thanks a lot. Over to Devani, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you, sir. So my next question is addressed to Ms. Rita Sen, ma'am. Now, the policy acknowledges and recognizes the condition, for most of the teachers, though the kind of work they have been doing, we do not, deny that. The way they have pulled up their stockings and put in themselves into, churning out a new avatar. But we do see there is a lot of unmotivated and dispirited Indian educator. And there is a level of complacency when it comes to their professional development as compared to any other industry. So my question is like reskilling, upskilling, learning new skills will be now rigorously expected of educators to meet the changing demands. Because if the new education policy has to be implemented, it will, teachers and educators will have to push their limits beyond. Now, do you foresee an arrangement? And you being such an experienced person and ex-principal, so could you suggest some kind of module or throw some light on what kind of changes would be required in teacher education in the coming months or the year or two? Yeah.
Yeah. You see, the basic objective of NEP 2020 is to ensure that our education system is in consonance with the rich and diverse culture of our country, and at the same time it attempts to prepare the student to be at par with the best in the global system. Now, we all know that historically our education system has focused only on preparing our students for exams. So there was a lot of emphasis on rote learning, on note-taking, note-making, and there was a strict adherence to the syllabus. There was no attempt to really think and go beyond the prescribed syllabus. So NEP now emphasizes on the development of problem solving, critical thinking skills that were ignored so far, life skills that will prepare our students to navigate through life with relative ease. Now, of course, as Anuradha Madam said, that they have suggested 3 major steps in this direction: the multidisciplinary approach, the development of 21st century skills, and of course, experiential learning. Now, a policy remains a policy until and unless someone is empowered to lead the change. Now, who is this someone who will lead the change? Of course, it's the teacher. So these reforms will have no meaning until and unless we have a teacher at the core of it all. A teacher is the pivot around which the entire policy revolves. He or she is the catalyst who will make it, who will implement these changes and these suggestions that have been given by the NEP. It is the teacher who will create this environment of that will create this curiosity in children, where they will develop their ability to ask questions, to explore, to think, to find answers for themselves, set their own learning goals, and of course, also be able to work independently towards achieving those goals. However, the NEP recognizes that the quality, competence, and character of the teacher is central to the success of this policy, because teachers play the most important, the most significant role in nation building. But administrators and school leaders have to provide that environment where teaching as a profession and teachers as professionals can thrive. NEP also recognizes the fact that the dismal condition of teacher education as well as teaching conditions are responsible for not attracting the best candidates in teaching. So it has suggested several reforms to make teaching an attractive proposition, an attractive choice as a profession, to make it as the first choice of the brightest and the most talented young people in our country. There is a lot that can be done to improve the quality of teachers. And of course, they have to be, as we have all agreed, that they have to be given back their lost dignity, their lost respect, status in society. And that doesn't come just like that. It comes with certain, with certain facilities that you give the teacher. unless you give the teacher proper good working conditions, unless you give the teacher good salaries to take care of their families, nobody will be attracted to these professions. So as Mr. Ashok Pandey very rightly said, that the fund allocation from the part of the government has to be very, very solid to make all this happen. Unless that happens, unless that fund allocation is there, private schools are maybe are doing it because they're doing it from their own funds. But most of our schools are in the non-private sector. They are in the government sector, they are in the villages, they are in the rural sector. So over there, government funding becomes very, very important. So we need to ensure that this funding comes, because only then it will, the wheels of education will start moving. Unless you oil the wheels are not going to move. So that is an important factor that has to be looked into. Of course, a lot of emphasis has to be laid on teacher recruitment policies, which should be absolutely fair, impartial. There should be no political or other kind of interference. Then incentives have to be given to teachers, particularly to teachers to go and work in the rural sector. They have to be given accommodation, or they have to be given special allowances to attract them to go and work there. These are important steps to be taken so that we can move towards achieving what we want to achieve. Then, of course, in the government sector, transfer is a very big thing. Teachers get transferred very often. So that has to be stopped, because that, interferes with the continuity, that it disrupts the class, because students in schools particularly get very attached to a teacher. So teacher frequently moves from one school to another. That disrupts the education, because children get flustered. They take time to get adjusted to the next teacher. So those have to be stopped. Then teachers cannot be, that is another very important point which has been spoken about in NEP. Teachers should not be put on any non-teaching administrative work. Today, teachers get involved in census work, in election work, and during that time, our country is so big, election is a huge thing. So if teachers are roped in there, then what happens to the students? For months together, students don't have classes because the teachers are not there. So this has to be stopped, and the NEP very rightly talks about it and says that this needs to stop, and teachers cannot be engaged in anything other than academic work. Then teachers have to be given the freedom to use the methodology that they feel is most important, not go strictly by what you or I think. Teachers should have the freedom to use the methodology that he or she thinks is most appropriate for the kind of children that he or she is dealing with. So that freedom has to be given. Then, of course, there has to be enough opportunities for continuous professional development, because otherwise teachers, particularly those who are good, they feel stagnated, they feel demotivated. Another thing that is very important, which the NEP talks about, is that there should not be any difference between the junior, the middle, and the senior school teachers. Today, we find that most teachers are trying to move from the junior school to the middle school to the senior school because there is a difference in salaries. PRTs and TGTs and PGTs, it should not be there. So that will ensure that we have continuity, and we have their teachers are satisfied that we have the best teachers, and in every segment, and no segment is considered more important than the other. I think primary school teaching is extremely challenging. So I do not think that a primary school teacher is in any way inferior to a teacher teaching 11th and 12th. In the same way, middle school has its own challenges. Senior school has its own challenges. So each teacher is equipped to handle those challenges. So there should not be any difference between one teacher and another. Vertical mobility based on merit has to be made very, very significant. And so these are, it's a continuous ongoing process. So, and as soon as one group is ready to retire, I think there should be another group which is ready to take over. So there should be that kind of training, continuous training, depending on, of course, on the leadership and management skills that people have. Not everybody has it. So you have to identify those people, you have to identify those teachers and make sure they can be trained to take on leadership positions. So, and that gives a lot of responsibility to the school management, to the school principal, to the school administrators, to school leaders. These talents have to start at the micro level. Each school has to do it, and then only it will go to the macro level where there is a gradual elevation in.
Thank you, Mrs. Sen. A related question to Dr. Pandey is that you've spoken, Shubji, about comprehensive, talking about the 21st century skills, per se, the students. How can we design a system for such a plot for educators as well, where what are those future mapping skills for educators?
Yeah, thank you, Devyani. While Rita was talking, and she has given such a beautiful narration of teacher development program, and I was almost tempted to tell that despite India being such a huge country and such a large number of unemployable youth, India is a vitamin T deficient country. You know what is vitamin T? T for teachers, right? And she talked about one group goes and the next group comes, which means we need a long pipeline of teachers. But that pipeline right now is dried up. So I think collectively we have to think about as to how that pipeline can have a continuous supply of teachers. So that is what I thought that I'll add to what Rita has said. You're talking about future skills, right? I think a lot of mind shift has to take place. This policy talks about certain principles which are not written in so many clear words. But there are three basic principles when it comes to teaching and learning the policy is talking about. One principle is presentation to the children, that how teachers are going to present their lessons. So lesson planning, the pedagogy, the assessment, that all will come in that category, let us say presentation. The second principle is expression, how the children are going to express themselves about their experiences with learning. And not only learning of cognitive things, but the learning of non-cognitive things as well. And the third principle is engagement with the teaching and learning process. So how teachers and students are coming together and co-designing, co-learning, growing together, that is the main thing. And that is where this policy is positively deviating from its previous pronouncements. Now, if we closely look at these three, Devyani, I think we had to think about that myth that your high percentage in 10th class, 12th class is going to take you far. I think that is busted long time ago. And if we are not acknowledging it, I think we are committing some kind of a suicide, right? And therefore, what has come out very clearly, the latest I can quote to you is the LinkedIn survey, which has identified what are the future skills required out of a survey of CEOs. And the topmost is leadership qualities, the innovation, communication, people's skill. Now, I think we have to embed these things into our curriculum and as to how we inculcate these things. And that will ensure the future of the children. And Anuradha was talking about COVID-19 experience. I think apart from making even the most stubborn amongst us to adapt to technology, I think we have also adapted to a lot of things, looking inwards, self-belief, emotional connectivity, resilience, kindness. I think we started very hurriedly forgiving each other because we didn't know what is going to happen to us, So I think these are the kind of things that we have to bring to the children, and that will prepare them for their future. And the society also needs that, where everybody is sensitive about the needs of each other. And that sensitivity will become the antibody in the society, like we are looking for antibodies within ourselves to fight the COVID. You get my point, Devyani?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And I'm so tempted with your vitamin T deficiency thing, because definitely India does lack in quality, good quality
Yes.
teachers. And somewhere, I think the sad thing was that for years, teaching is not the first choice of any educator. It is always, I couldn't do IS, I couldn't clear engineering, I couldn't do this, then let's come to teaching. You know,
Yeah.
that I really hope is removed, and this teaching becomes incentivized. People take it like the best brains
Yeah.
pour in, and not just a tier one and, you know, the microscopic handful of people, but by and large, teaching becomes something which, you know, way back the way India used to look at teachers.
Yeah.
So that
Absolutely.
is something I really hope new education policy does to the whole system, because teachers definitely are the common factor, and we all have agreed upon that educators play a very, very central role in the lives, as Chaitanya ji said, that, you know, the maximum hours which child spends, in the impressionable hours which the child spends, is in the company of the educator.
Yeah.
And you know, this is very important, that for every, and then the educators hold the future of the nation. And the sad story is they become educators by default. They're shaping the future. So yes, I would really, I don't know, I became very emotional on this point, and I really feel that we get the best brains and the best minds in, by and large, in India for teaching. Now over to you, Chaitanya ji, for the further questioning session.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am. I have something with me now, the vitamin T. So I am handing over the vitamin T to Sandeep ji, asking him how will you use this vitamin T to reboot the education system in India, with all the changes that is being taking place. As Dr. Pandey and other panelists suggested, it is the basically it is a collaborative effort between the central government, state government, educators, and the whole country. So what is
Yeah.
your view on that? How do we think from a progressive view, or what is it that your take on that?
Yeah, no, sure, Dr. Chaitanya. So I think, I mean, as very aptly said by Rita ma'am and also Ashok ji, is that I mean, there is a deficiency. Honestly, I mean, there is no doubt about it. But how do you prepare the teachers? I mean, teachers they can't be developed in isolation, right? You need to have a very robust system in place to ensure that the teachers, both for the pipeline and also for the supply, right? It's not only the pipeline, but also, like, once someone is in the system, then how you are nurturing the motivation and the excitement of that person to be really effective in the profession, right? So, I mean, I have at least got a chance to work with as many as 200,000 teachers in country, and also very closely with teachers in Africa, right? So I was worked in, like, to developing world, and I've seen the teachers, I mean, mostly across the board, 25% of the teachers at any point in time, they don't want to continue in their profession. And why they don't? Because they don't see any value, and they don't have any social capital which they can cherish upon. And mostly what they've been labeled is a kind of, whatever is happening in education in terms of the children learning outcome, the blame goes to the teachers. And there is a lot of carrot and stick style of providing a kind of support or the punishment to the teachers basis on their success and failure. And one teacher is being held responsible to certain things, whereas teaching as a community is not being seen as a profession which could be nurtured, developed, and motivated to do well. So I think that relates completely. I mean, if you track that back to the system, so instead, I mean, not only thinking about the teachers, but also think about the system where they operate in. A lot of teachers when they join the profession, I mean, I completely agree with Devyani that teaching as a profession perhaps in India is not the first choice. But at the same time, a lot of people who really want to be teacher. I mean, it's like, if you look at the government education system, young professional, when they come and they join the teaching profession, I think they feel very motivated and they come with a kind of very pride saying that, okay, I will change the school. And I have seen multiple schools be changed by the teachers who has just joined the system. But by being in the system for like 10, 20 years, the kind of treatment they receive from the system, the kind of like, I think the reward and punishment arrangement, the kind of recognition processes are inbuilt in the system, they tend to get demotivated because they're not doing anything, they're not getting any additional recognition while doing something different from their peer. So if someone is doing good in the education system, mostly in the public education system, I think they are seen, by their peers in doubt, right? So they'll be like, no, why you are doing so much if you're not going to get more, right? So there's a lot of peer pressure of not doing good as well in the system. So how do you change the mindset? How do you change the behavior of teachers and teacher educators and the system as a whole? To ensure that there is a proper, I think, system in place which is motivated enough to help teachers to grow and feel autonomous and make sure that they feel king and queen of their classroom and do whatever is most appropriate for their children and not whatever is most appropriate for their officials, right? I mean, so that's how I think the trend has to change. The focus has to change in teachers' mind. And that cannot change until you have a very clear understanding at the system level, which can definitely sort of, I think, promote these kind of culture. So we were part of the initial daily reform framework. I mean, working very closely with Sisodia ji and also Atishi. What we have realized is that, I mean, especially with my experience working very closely in the systemic reform, especially in Delhi, we have seen that the teachers, especially when you look at the kind of work the teacher do on the ground, if their system officials are not understanding the value in it, it's very hard for them to justify their act in the classroom. So how do you change the mindset of the system? How do you change the political will? As Dr. Ashok said, that if education becomes the political thing, then it becomes a challenging, right? It should be the political priority that I really want to create a better society by nurturing high quality education, by providing high quality education. So do we have enough political will whereby we could regulate the pre-service sector, for instance, right? I mean, the quality of pre-service in India is also a kind of a big question. How do you, the quality of in-service in the country? Look at the public education system where it's not only the concern, the quality of teachers in public education system, a lot of affordable private school where a majority of kids go. I mean, quality of teacher in affordable private school is also a big concern. I mean, the quality of education is not really great in affordable private school. At least I can tell with my experience working with thousands of affordable private schools in Delhi. So I think, I mean, it's a broader area to look at. And I think it requires a very, very robust, I think, very genuine political will, very high bureaucratic commitment, a good funding, as Dr. Ashok said, that it's not only the funding allocation, but capability to spend that funding. I mean, what had been so far is a kind of historical budget arrangement is that even if 4.2% of the GDP allocation, which is being provided by the center to the state, is being not fully spent by the state within the time limit and being sent to the center, right? So how do you build the capability of the system to really implement it? How do you make sure that the center and the states are working in tandem and they are really trying to solve for a common cause and not really trying to just do the politics on education, right? So I think there are multiple things and a more collective way of solving these, and there are different component part needs to be handled. And as other panelists said, and also I think everyone would agree, that it's not a kind of the work which can be done by only one type of stakeholder. It will be very important to have the collective sort of conscience, collective purpose, and there's very clear goals to really attain and being very collectively involved to solve for it. So I think the regulation, I mean, the building the infrastructure and the capability of in-service teachers training as well. 50% diets in my country, in our country are under-resourced. I mean, they have only 50% faculties. Who will train these teachers? I mean, is training is a kind of standalone? Do we need to build a social community of practice for teachers? So there are so many things which needs to be thought through, which require, as I said, a very committed political will, very committed bureaucratic leadership, and some sort of funding and collective effort by different stakeholders to solve for it, to my understanding.
Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot for the insights, all the insights. All your points are very well taken. So my next question again is to Anuradha ma'am. I have three to four things I make in my kitty. One is the embracing the technology. Second is the most threatening for the teachers, that online courses, online degrees offered by several private players in the country and as well as across the globe. Third is the platform for education. When we say that the blended learning or the flipped classroom sort of things are being, that is more viable. So what is your take on, I know that the students are more and more smarter, and I'm sure that they are well versed with all these things, because I know the moment you give Android phone to a kid, he will just stop everything and he will just focus on Android phone. So which means that they are more and more smarter. So how do you make sure that our teachers are also smarter enough to teach and combat these kind of technological threats? And to my understanding, the least affected profession is teaching, even if there is automation in the education industry. So that is my understanding from several surveys, that primary or the elementary teachers, the senior teachers, teaching profession is the least affected one. But at the same time, the technology has to be taken in such a way that will help their to upskill the teachers, and at the same time reduce the, as Rita ma'am rightly suggested, the administrative workload, reducing the administrative workload and focusing more on academics and research. So how do you think that it can be implemented effectively across the teaching community?
So I completely agree with you, and the fact that the children are born with the DNA of technology. They are a lot smarter than us. The way they handle technology, the way they learn, and the way they control it, we as adults and our teachers, they will have to work 10 times harder to be able to reach that level, which requires a lot of conscious effort and commitment, for sure. But because now we have so many options available for the teachers to upgrade themselves technologically, and even we as schools, for example, again going back to the March and April of 2020, so when we all shifted to the online platform, the first thing that we went into as management and leadership was that, when we are using a platform, initially when we started, we all went on the Zoom platform because that was most easily available and accessible. And then came the, the G Suite and the Google and the Teams. So we took that conscious decision that when we are transitioning to something, it must be long-term. Our teachers must be trained and equipped to handle it so that they are able to confidently take the students through it. Also, in the process, somewhere, the teachers and the students accepted this fact that a student can help a teacher deliver her lesson better by supporting them in technology, and the teachers willingly took that support. So, that image that the teachers generally carried of I know it all, it helped us break that image also, and for good, because the teacher should not be a sage on stage. It is a collaborative interaction between the students and the teachers. When that stands accepted, we move on, and NEP is taking us in that particular direction where, like Dr. Pandey said, the teacher has to plan. Then it is about the student understanding, and then the student and the teacher coming together to, to take the knowledge and the learning ahead. So I feel that with the availability, with technology, where the children are better off in terms of their pace and understanding, but the teachers have very well understood that they cannot shy away, they cannot hold themselves back if they have to move on this path. And these 10 months have taken us through that experience. And the third thing, which is very encouraging, is that the students and teachers coming together to support each other. You know, while I, as a teacher, I am able to deliver the concept to you with my knowledge and understanding, I can take support from you as a student to take me through, the usage of technology. Also, we, the teachers in this time, have realized and would realize that learning, it is an ongoing thing. Research. So these degrees which are available online, or the courses that are available, whether it is edX or any such other such platform, or so many webinars which are educating, or the workshops that the CBSE and all other are taking. So that is being taken rightfully, provided the school leadership is encouraging the teachers, creating that provision, giving them that time, and respecting and valuing the knowledge addition that the teacher is doing. So as a principal, if my teacher goes and attends a course and I give her that opportunity to share her knowledge with others, that in itself is a reward for the teacher. So like on this platform, we were just discussing that, how do we motivate the teacher? The teacher motivation comes from the opportunities that you get. So if I have gained some knowledge, if I have gained some proficiency, and I am able to get that platform to be able to share that knowledge and be valued for that added knowledge that I have, I think that in itself becomes an intrinsic motivation for me as a teacher to learn more and to, to take myself to the next level. And bringing the interest of the students and teachers together, like we were talking of this, the vitamin T, and the youth wanting to be teachers at the first level. So for that, if we give opportunities for our older children to sometimes, engage the younger ones with some clubs and such activities, because we've had that experience. So especially again on online sessions, we allowed some of our senior students to run clubs for the junior ones. And it was so heartening when some senior students came back and said, ma'am, the love that we got from the students in the class, we actually feel that teaching is a great profession. And it was very heartening for me that youngsters are maybe, that this one experience that they have later in life will encourage them to look at teaching as their first profession by choice, So I think I may have diverged a little from the question that you have asked, but to sum it up, what I want to say is that yes, the cutting edge technology that we are talking of, teachers will have to keep that pace. The students and the teachers can come together, collaborate, and bridge that gap. And that is what would make education even more beautiful in the days to come.
You're right, very right, ma'am. You have not, I don't think you have taken any diversion. I think you have concluded in the right way, putting all the elements in the right fashion. So thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much for the wonderful explanation and the real example of, seniors or senior students teaching juniors, which I myself have experienced in my college when I used to teach. So next is to Ashok ji. Again, coming back to vitamin T, how would you want to use it, as a capsule or an injection? The right day, today is the day of vaccination and building of infrastructure. And rightly said, pointed by Anuradha ma'am, when she said that it is the school leadership. Do you think that the vitamin T has to come from the top, or it has to come from the middle layer? What do you think?
Dr. Chaitanya, one thing very interesting I would like to tell you. I recently did a small research, and the finding of the research are published, but I just in short, I want to tell you, the COVID has also taught us one new thing, that the educational leadership has emerged from the bottom up and the teacher leadership has emerged. This is for the first time that how the online teaching will take place, what platform to use, how to go in the classroom to the scrutiny of the whole world without preparation, and play to the pranks of the children. As you yourself commented, they are one step ahead of the teachers. So this game of mute, unmute, whiteboard scratching, pranks, keeping ma'am out of the whole group, all those things, teachers learn themselves. It did not come from the leadership of the school, right?
Yeah,
Where the leadership has made a difference is either enabling this teacher leadership or hampering this leadership. So therefore, I think leadership does not wait for the hierarchies. It emerges wherever there is a vacuum. And this time, this vacuum was filled by the teachers themselves. So I think this is my first response to what you said. But taking a cue from what Sandeep ji said and my own experience, I can tell you, there is no dearth of innovative teachers, whether in the private sector or in the government sector. The only thing is, how do we nurture them? And how do we scale it up? That is the whole problem. And Delhi government experiment itself, like any other government. I mean, did you know the name of any government school teacher who brings innovation in the classroom? But it started happening because there was an incentive for that. There was somebody who was telling them, come on, you can do it. Come on, this is what you are supposed to do. So therefore, I think most of our panelists have said that there is a whole lot of things we can do first with the existing teachers as to how we can bring leadership in them. And incentivization is at various levels. It doesn't have to be cash driven all the time. It could be non-cash also. It could be a pure words of love, faith, and trust. It could be giving them an opportunity to come and present a paper in a seminar. It is shouting out their achievements in the corridors and in the assemblies all the time, and is sponsoring them. Wherever there is an opportunity, let us sponsor those teachers to go and take part, write, publish, write a blog. Social media is abuzz with opportunities like this. So I think we have to exercise those things. Because, we may blame the teaching profession, but in any other profession, the growth is not at the proportion of the level of the pyramid, It has to go conical at one stage. After all, only one army general will be there. So in a school also, you will have only one principal, right? But then does it mean that 150 other teachers will feel dejected? No. The idea is that how do they feel about themselves? What is the worth of they themselves value? And how they are growing as human beings, how they are growing emotionally, socially, intellectually, what are the values they bring on the platform, on the campus. I think that is also growth story. So I think these are some of the efforts which can be brought together. But coming back to NEP, we have not mentioned NEP in this webinar for the last 20 minutes. So let me tell you, NEP 2020 talks about merit-based promotion. And also non-hierarchical in the sense that as a teacher, I can be taken as a policy maker. I can go as a researcher. I can go as an expert. This is what the policy is talking about. I think this is a very, very good thing. And it will bring us at par with the foreign countries, advanced countries where school teachers become professors also. I think in India, it is a dream as on today. But if this dream can be fulfilled through the instrument of NEP, I think I'll be the happiest person.
Thank you, Ashokji. I'll just take a small divert towards Sandeep ji. So my question is, see, there is a divide between when we talk about the metro cities or tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 cities. What is your take on the or opinion on the implementation of everything whatever we spoke so far? How do you think that this can be rightly implemented in the rural areas where education is not delivered, or the school leadership is not taking the education seriously. Rather, they have different other interests. So how do you think that it can be implemented in rural areas where, which is more serious, and we find that there are very good students coming from rural areas?
Yeah, no, definitely. It's a very good question, Dr. Chaitanya. And I think that's the biggest challenge, right? If you think of a kind of treating to the top layer is not enough, right? You have to make sure that you are reaching to the last mile. And most of the kind of, population of underserved live in the areas which we call rural, right? I mean, so basically, if you look at the kind of the public education system, and I hope that Dr. Ashok would agree that due to the lack of political will, there has been a lot of lack of irrationalization of the teachers vacancy. So you'll see that in public education system, most of the teachers are concentrated towards the urban centers and the headquarters. So if you look at the kind of disproportionate arrangement of teachers sitting in the urban centers vis-a-vis rural, most of the rural schools in the country will find single teacher schools where you will have good number of kids coming to the school because there are no alternatives. So the private schools are not that widespread in the rural areas. So what happens that the most of the kids go to the government school, whereas the number of teachers are very low, because most of the teachers, because of their political connections mostly, they tend to request for the transfer to the urban centers where they could send their kids to the good schools, I mean, so-called private schools, right? So that's how it works. Now, what is happening is that until we really think of rationalizing the teacher's number, the teacher's position, I mean, one is that the teacher vacancy is important thing. If you really want to address this to the rural part of the country, you have to make sure that you have the teachers to address this, first of all. Schools are there. I mean, if you look at the access thing and a lot of emphasis on the access because of this Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan, and also making sure that we have schools in 1 kilometer and 3 kilometer premises. At least there are schools in 1 kilometer and 3 kilometer in the country. There is universalization at least at the access level. But what is happening is that a lot of schools where I have met kind of my personal sort of visits, I have seen that the rural part of the country, some of the places where you see like 200 kids with one teacher, right? And some of the places you'll see 6 kids, 3 teachers, right? I mean, there is no sort of balance between these two. I mean, one of the schools very close to Bangalore in Ramnagara block, I was visiting 3 years back, and I remember that it was a kind of 25 kids in that school, grade 1 to 5, and there were 4 teachers in that school. Just half kilometer, like half an hour drive from Bangalore, the school was, and only 25 kids there, and there are, I think, 3 to 4 teachers. Whereas in one of these districts in Uttar Pradesh, Basti district, I was visiting one of the schools. There were 239 kids were enrolled, and there was only 1 teacher. So how do you really show that commitment to rationalize the teachers' presence, first of all, and make sure that the urban PTR is 15:1, the rural is like 80:1. How do you make sure that you show the commitment to change that scenario, first of all? Because until you think that, it'll be very hard for any system to deliver the education to the last mile. The second is the use of technology. I mean, as Dr. Ashok said, and also I think Rita emphasizes on that, and also Anuradha, everyone is saying that, and I think we are just talking about it. Though there are so many concerns as well, because we have tried to do that as part of delivery of the public education system, the use of technology. I think when we are talking about the tech smart kids, when we are talking about the DNA of the kids of having the tech as a kind of the DNA of them, I think largely those kids which have the access to devices and the technology. I mean, rural part, we tried to launch a kind of program in Madhya Pradesh, and the uptake was 0.2%. And mostly the parents who had the mobile phone, I think smartphones, I mean, generally the phone lies with the fathers of the rural community, and generally the access to the mobile, even if there is a kind of smartphone in the family, is not necessary to be accessed by the child. So child will be the last one to get that device, because and the capability of that device as well, whether you would be able to download like 3 to 4 app there and make sure that you are just not teaching your kids. So I mean, all those things are there. So I think, how do you really disrupt the entire thinking from being very linear to very disruptive in terms of technology, and making sure that you don't only rely on the internet, but also think like, how could you think of very innovative way of using the technology, and at the same time making sure that the teachers are available to handhold kids and making sure that the education is being implemented. So there are 2 things, as I said, One is that rationalization of teachers and maybe consolidation of schools, making the school campuses, which NEP talks about, creating a kind of magnet schools where you create a high excellence, center of excellence, and then attract a lot of kids from that particular community to be part of that. Make sure the teachers are available. Make sure the curriculum is available, especially the teaching learning material. I think most of the kids, they struggle. They don't have the reading books, right? So reading is being emphasized again and again. Do you have enough material on the ground? It is important to make sure that the technology is being used in a very rational way. It's not that completely you are thinking of technology in a very sort of ambitious way, but not being able to use it. So I think there are 3-4 things I would say. One is the availability of teacher, consolidation of schools, making sure the technology is being thought through in a more disruptive way, and making sure that the end sort of end the beneficiary is being benefited by the technology, and participation of the community, because community has been kept little sort of away from the education system. I mean, the school management committee and all those things are good on paper, but in reality, I think mostly they're very politically charged community. So how could you make sure that parents have a very sort of genuine participation in school processes, and not being only seen as a kind of the people who are sending their kids and they don't know how to teach and what their kids should learn and do not learn. So I mean, generally we label that they're first generation learner, they don't know, right? So how do you embrace? And the school has got the responsibility of embracing the children's parents as well, and making sure they're feeling respected. And some of the examples could be learned from Delhi. I mean, the way the community participation happened, I think that could be replicated in other part of the country. So 3 things, as I said, I mean, teachers availability, school consolidation could be like one way of doing this. Second is use of technology. Third is community participation. If we focus on these 3 things and making sure that the political will is there, a bureaucratic commitment is there, enough funding is there, then I think we'd be able to reach to the last mile.
Thank you, Sandeepji, for the elaborative discussion and the insight. Now let me hand over to Devani ji to take this forward.
Thank you, Chaitanya ji. Now we are coming towards the end of this session, and I have one last question to Ms. Anuradha Handa, and that is that every is Anuradha there? No, yeah. So that is that we've always been here in cities and everywhere talking about progressive education. We've been talking so much in last 10-15 years about an apple is not equal to an orange. Every student is unique, and educational institutions should be able to cater to the array of students and provide that kind of a platform. But you being the principal and you being in a progressive school, where you see one teacher till the pandemic walks in the class with her same resource, same textbooks, same kind of AV. What different? How can she cater to this? And how can she, maintain this uniqueness in a class of 40 or 35? Of course, NEP does also talk about, progressive and experiential. And all these things are big words. They are very heavy words. But what is the reality? We have to first look at the progressive schools, only then we will be going to the tier 2, tier 3. So Anuradha, my question is to you that how do you think a scenario like this can be maintained, and how can we maintain the uniqueness of each and every child in the system? What role the educators will have to take on now?
Yes, Devyani ji. So in order to be able to help discover the uniqueness of each child, by the end of the journey of the school, so that every student gets to realize his or her potential and knows where to go in the journey of life, what works more than an individual teacher is the system that we create at the level of the school. As an example, like you said, yes, if I as an individual teacher, when I have 30 students, 40 students in my class, for me to be able to discover the unique potential of every student, it requires a lot of interaction and a lot of time that I need to spend. But when you look at it at the level of a system, so, when we look at in our system, for example, typically a student who enters school would spend half the time in classroom and other half is in different activity areas. So the child is not exposed to just one or two teachers. He or she is going through at least 15 activities in a week, and every teacher during each interaction in that activity is having some takeaway about how the child is responding to what is being done in the class. Now, if those observations are brought together, and that discussion and that the 360 report card that the NEP talks about, which a lot of progressive schools already have a part of it in place, So laying equal emphasis on every aspect of education, be it numeracy, literacy, or music, dance, art, theater, or presentation by children, making observations and gradually being able to draw out from those observations systematically definitely helps understand the strengths of each child. And in different parts of the school journey, like we have this 5+3+3+4, which NEP is suggesting. So, each of these is actually a milestone that the child has to reach before he goes to the next stage. When we move from the primary, where the foundation, literacy, numeracy is emphasized upon, and the communication of the child, and all that the children are going to be doing in the rest of the journey of their school, a foundation for that and a familiarity with all of it has to be laid in the foundational years. Then working on their skills in classes 3, 4, and 5 in the next 3 years, helping develop a range in terms of, humanities and politics and culture. And finally, in the last 4 years of the school, where, you allow each child to, through experiences, through interactions with society, with people from society, to be able to understand what is my core strength and bring that out. So that uniqueness of each child and that discovery only comes through the journey of school and the systems that are built, and properly, those observations should be carried forward correctly from 1 year to the next. So it is that when a child transitions from one class to the other and from one wing to the next, how we are taking those observations forward, how much deliberation we are having on it, I think that is what helps the discovery of the innate strengths and talents and uniqueness of the child. And that is where a progressive school, where you have all, each of the domains, whether it is scholastic, co-scholastic, sports, life skills, along with the academics, So when that 360 report card comes out, I think that is what helps discover what the strengths of the child and the attributes are all about.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Anuradha. And now we've already exceeded our time limit. We are coming to the end of the session. I mean, we were so immersed in this rich discussion that, believe me, none of us wanted to leave. And let me just tell you, I just got a message that we had more than 1,000 viewers on our Facebook. So this was a very, very enriching session. Thank you, all our panelists. Let me quickly brief up the session. We had Dr. Ashok Pandey talk about his coined the term vitamin T deficiency, which is teacher deficiency in the system, which became very popular in the discussion, and we all accepted this and pondered. He also highlighted some of the red flags and challenges which the NEP, in spite of its, he agreed that it's a very, very powerful policy and a very revolutionary document, but yes, it is going to have challenges like non-partisan arrangement between the center and state. That's something we need to care for. He recommended the expanding of funds from 6% to 10%, which we again, and then of course there could be digital inequality. He recommended very beautifully that there should be a hand-holding between the private and the public sector. And I'm sure he being part of so much of policy making, these things will be just some of the hurdles and obstacles which we will be taking care of. Then we had Ms. Rita Sen, who spoke about preparedness, who said that no policy has ever given so much of emphasis on the age group of 3 to 6, the Anganwadi, the age group of students, and it creates a very, very inclusive, policy which goes much beyond the RTE as well. Mr. Sandeep Mishra spoke about an empowered teacher can only happen when there is a collective energies convergence of all the stakeholders, the government, the private sector, the non-profit organizations. So we all have to collectively work towards creating an empowered educator. And finally, we had Mrs. Anuradha Handa, who spoke at length about the pedagogical preparedness, the kind of deliverance of how the teachers would be prepared to take this policy by the horns. She also spoke about teaching learning should be collaborative, which was something very beautifully. She mentioned that 21st century skills should not just be something which needs to be delivered to the students, but it should be hand-holding between the teachers and the students. We come to the end of this session, and Brother Chaitanya, if you could have any last words about this. But before that, I want to announce that the Edudevs School of Inspired Teaching and Learning, in partnership with Amrita Vishwa Vidyapeetham, is launching its web series on decoding NEP 2020. And today was its first inaugural session. And I'm sure there will be n number of these sessions where we'll have great deliberation on some of varied aspects of new education policy, and would try to decode it, take it forward to our educators who would then benefit from the same. And Chaitanya ji, I would want you to say some last words to our panelists, vote of thanks from your end.
Yeah, I was only thinking about the vitamin T, how to, because it was a wonderful session. We never expected that it will take so long. And let me thank from on behalf of Amrita and on my personal behalf that all of you have wonderful thought process, and it is really enriching to see that, you know, all are excited about the whole NEP implementation. And my request to you is, you know, how the guiding principles can be applied practically, and how can we make sure that the teachers can be upskilled, or we can uplift the entire teaching community by telling them, educating them the practical part of the guiding principles of the entire NEP. I think that is more critical for us. So let us see. I will also try my level best on how we can bring out the philosophy of the practical part. And let me thank again all of you, the attendees also here, especially Devani ma'am, because we have been discussing for a long time, and finally today is the day when the vaccination also started, and we have some hope, and I'm 100% sure that with all your support, the teachers will definitely, or teaching community can definitely be uplifted. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Devyani ji,
for
Brother Chaitanya, Rita, and Radha. I think Sandeep has left because he had to attend another program. But the rest of you, many thanks. Wish you all the best.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot.
Such a pleasure.
Thank you, Rita.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.